It was one of those crisp autumn mornings where the air had a slight chill, and the world seemed to be bathed in golden hues. I should have been in a meeting halfway across the state, discussing project deadlines and sales forecasts. Instead, I found myself turning into my driveway, the hum of my car's engine the only sound in the quiet suburban cul-de-sac. The meeting had been canceled last minute, and I decided to surprise Jessica, my wife of 7 years, by coming home early. I had every reason to be excited. I had spent weeks planning a romantic anniversary getaway to the Bahamas. The tickets were tucked neatly in my briefcase, along with a note that I'd composed late one night. Jessica was going to be thrilled. I was sure of it. She'd been complaining lately about how we never had time for each other, and I thought this would be the perfect way to show her how much I cared. As I pulled into the driveway, something was off. Jessica's car was parked in its usual spot, but right next to it, partially blocking the sidewalk, was a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. My first thought was that she had company, a friend, maybe, or someone from the neighborhood. But as I stepped out of the car, a faint unease began to creep in. The blinds in the living room were drawn. Jessica never closed them during the day. I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could, intending to tiptoe inside and catch her by surprise. A bouquet of her favorite flowers was in one hand, and my briefcase with the tickets in the other. I barely had time to process the silence of the house before I heard it. Soft laughter from upstairs. Her laughter. The kind I hadn't heard in months. It was followed by the low rumble of a man's voice, unfamiliar and intimate. My body froze, every nerve electrified with a strange mix of fear and denial. My mind raced through 100 explanations. Maybe her brother was visiting. Maybe, but then her laugh floated down again, light and playful, and I knew. I just knew. Each step up the staircase felt heavier than the last. The voices grew clearer, her light, flirtatious tone, his deeper, confident replies. My stomach churned. My heart raced. The door to our bedroom was ajar, offering just a sliver of the scene inside. And there they were. Jessica was sprawled across the bed, her bare shoulder peeking out from beneath the sheets. She was laughing at something the man beside her had said, her head tilted towards him, her face glowing with a joy I hadn't seen in a long time. He was shirtless, propped up on one elbow, his hand resting casually on her waist. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. My vision blurred, and the flowers slipped from my grasp, landing silently on the carpet. The tickets in my briefcase felt like a cruel joke now, their promise of a romantic escape mocking me as I watched my wife share her intimacy with another man. I wanted to burst into the room, to yell, to demand answers, to throw him out of the house. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the sheer shock of seeing the woman I'd loved for nearly a decade in someone else's arms. Or maybe it was the fear of what I might do in my rage. Instead, I turned and walked back down the stairs, each step feeling like a weight dragging me deeper into despair. In the kitchen, I collapsed into a chair, the bouquet lying limp on the counter where I'd tossed it. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through our text messages, desperately searching for signs I had missed, clues that might have warned me. But all I found were mundane exchanges, grocery lists, reminders about bills, occasional "I love you" texts that now felt hollow. How long had this been going on? Had she already been seeing him when we celebrated her birthday last month? When I kissed her goodbye before my business trip 2 days ago? The thought made my stomach churn. Her laughter from upstairs reached my ears again, and a surge of anger shot through me. I opened her social media, scouring her photos, her posts, her friends list, looking for anything that might hint at her betrayal. But there was nothing, just pictures of us smiling at family gatherings, on vacations, at the small moments of our life that now felt like lies. The sound of footsteps upstairs snapped me out of my thoughts. They were moving around, getting dressed, I assumed. I wanted to march up there and confront them, to demand answers, to force her to see the pain she'd caused. But I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face her or the truth of what had happened. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began to research. Surveillance equipment, phone cloning tools, anything that could help me uncover the full extent of her betrayal. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be sure. I needed evidence. Upstairs, I heard the muffled sound of the front door closing. By the time I looked out the window, the black sedan was pulling out of the driveway, the man behind the wheel. Jessica stood at the door, watching him leave, her expression unreadable. When she turned back into the house, our eyes met through the window. She smiled, an ordinary smile, the kind she used to greet me every day. But to me, it was a mask, a facade hiding the lies she had built around us. That night, as we sat at the dinner table, I couldn't bring myself to speak. Jessica chatted about her day, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I nodded, smiled, played along. But my mind was racing, already plotting my next steps. I would find out everything. And when the time came, she would have to face the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Jessica with that man replayed in my mind like a nightmare on an endless loop. The sound of her laughter, so carefree and genuine, haunted me. Every glance she gave me during dinner, every casual touch of her hand, felt like an insult, like she was playing me for a fool. I needed more than just the truth about her infidelity. I needed to understand why. What had changed in our marriage? Or worse, what if she had never been truly happy with me? The next morning, Jessica left for work as usual, kissing me on the cheek before she walked out the door. Her scent lingered in the air long after she was gone, a cruel reminder of the intimacy we had shared, now tarnished. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway before heading to our bedroom. I began searching, methodically, room by room, drawer by drawer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I trusted my gut. Something about that man, about their ease with each other, suggested a deeper connection. It didn't take long to find the first clue. Tucked in the back of her vanity drawer was a receipt from a high-end jewelry store. The purchase, a diamond bracelet worth over $10,000, had been made just a month ago. But I hadn't given her any jewelry recently. The name on the receipt wasn't mine. It was his. Daniel Whitaker. My chest tightened as I stared at the neatly printed name. Who was this man? And what else had Jessica been hiding? I spent the next several hours in my office, researching. I typed his name into every search engine I could think of, trawling through social media profiles and public records. The results were sparse. Daniel Whitaker owned a luxury real estate firm in the city, specializing in multimillion-dollar properties. His social media accounts were curated to perfection. Pictures of him at charity galas, expensive cars, exotic vacations. It was a life of opulence and ease, a stark contrast to the modest life Jessica and I had built together. But what struck me the most was a detail buried in an old business article. Daniel's firm had recently been embroiled in a legal battle over accusations of fraud and theft, allegedly selling properties they didn't own, pocketing deposits, and leaving buyers with nothing but legal bills. The case had been settled out of court just a few weeks before my discovery. The thought gnawed at me. Jessica had been distant lately, sure, but she'd also been restless. She had mentioned wanting to change careers, to do something bigger with her life. Was this man a part of her grand plan? Or had he manipulated her into something she didn't fully understand? By the time Jessica returned home that evening, I had installed a hidden camera in our bedroom and cloned her phone using software I'd downloaded earlier in the day. The camera was disguised as a clock on her nightstand, and the phone cloning tool allowed me to see her texts, emails, and call logs in real time. The results came quickly. That night, as Jessica sat beside me on the couch, pretending to watch TV, she received a text from Daniel. "Daniel, tomorrow at 2. Same place. Don't be late." She replied almost immediately. "Jessica, I'll be there. Are you sure no one will find out?" The words sent a chill down my spine. Find out what? Was this just about their affair, or was there something more sinister at play? The next day, after she left for work, I followed her. She didn't go to her office. Instead, she drove to a high-end coffee shop downtown. Daniel was already there, waiting at a corner table. They spoke in hushed tones, their body language tense. I couldn't hear their conversation from where I sat, but I noticed her slipping a manila envelope across the table to him. He glanced inside, nodded, and handed her a small black box in return. I waited until they left before approaching the table. The envelope was gone, but something caught my eye. A handwritten note crumpled under the salt shaker. Jessica, make sure this stays off the books. If anyone asks, you've never seen it. D. My blood ran cold. Whatever they were involved in, it wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger, something dangerous. That evening, I confronted Jessica about the receipt for the diamond bracelet, but I didn't mention Daniel. Instead, I framed it as if I'd found it by accident while looking for batteries in her vanity. She froze, her eyes widening for just a second before she recovered. "Oh, that," she said with a nervous laugh. "It was a gift for my sister. I haven't had the chance to give it to her yet." Her lie was so blatant, so poorly constructed, that it almost made me laugh. But I played along, pretending to believe her. If she thought I was still in the dark, she'd be less cautious. And that was exactly what I needed. The breakthrough came 2 days later when the results from the camera recordings and phone cloning began to pile up. Jessica had been meeting Daniel regularly, not just for their affair, but for something involving legal contracts and large sums of money. I discovered emails between them detailing a plan to use her position at her company to funnel funds into a shell account he controlled. It all made sense now. The late nights, the expensive jewelry, her sudden interest in big opportunities. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was helping Daniel steal. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Jessica's boss, Evelyn, who had noticed irregularities in their accounts. "Jessica swore it was just a mistake," Evelyn said, her voice filled with doubt. "But I need to ask, has she been acting strange at home?" I assured Evelyn I would look into it, but as I hung up the phone, I realized the enormity of what I had uncovered. Jessica wasn't just risking her career. She was risking everything. Our marriage, her freedom, even our financial future. For a man who clearly had no intention of protecting her when things went south. That night, as Jessica slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had all the evidence I needed, proof of her affair, her involvement in Daniel's schemes, and her lies. But the question remained, what was I going to do about it? Would I confront her? Expose her to her boss, to the authorities? Or was there another way? Something that would make her truly understand the depth of her betrayal? As I lay there, the beginnings of a plan began to form. It was risky, but if it worked, it would give me the answers and the justice I so desperately needed. The plan crystallized in my mind over the next 2 sleepless nights. Confronting Jessica now would be premature. If I wanted to truly understand her motivations, and to hold both her and Daniel accountable, I needed more information. That meant delving deeper, playing the long game. I started by hiring a private investigator, someone discreet and highly recommended through a friend of mine who had gone through a similarly messy divorce. His name was Travis Holt, a wiry, no-nonsense man in his 40s with a knack for uncovering the truth. Infidelity cases are straightforward, Travis told me during our initial meeting at a diner on the edge of town. But this sounds like more than just a cheating wife. You've got fraud, possibly embezzlement. That's a whole different beast. Are you sure you're ready to follow this wherever it leads? I nodded, though the weight of his words settled heavily on my chest. I need to know everything. Every meeting, every transaction. If she's complicit, I need to know how far it goes. Travis leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes studying me. You got it. But just remember, what we find might not be what you want to hear. Over the next week, Travis worked quickly. He planted a GPS tracker on Jessica's car and started tailing her movements. He also began digging into Daniel Whitaker's background, uncovering details that even I hadn't been able to find. Meanwhile, I continued monitoring Jessica's phone and reviewing the footage from the hidden cameras I'd placed around the house. The first major break came 4 days into Travis's surveillance. Jessica met Daniel at a high-rise office building downtown, far from her usual haunts. Travis sent me pictures of the two of them entering together, Jessica carrying a laptop bag that I recognized from home. That evening, when she returned, I pretended everything was normal. She smiled at me as she walked through the door, kissed my cheek, and set her laptop bag down by the couch. As soon as she was in the shower, I opened the bag and rifled through its contents. Inside, I found what I'd been looking for, a folder containing several contracts, all bearing the letterhead of her company. The contracts themselves made my stomach churn. They were fraudulent, no doubt about it. Phony real estate deals with forged signatures and inflated figures. Jessica's name was on every one of them, her elegant cursive signature appearing alongside Daniel's. I quickly scanned the documents, taking photos with my phone before placing them back exactly as I'd found them. My heart pounded as I zipped the bag shut and slipped back into the kitchen. When Jessica came downstairs moments later, I was stirring a pot of soup, pretending nothing had happened. Travis's next update was even more damning. She's not just passing along documents, he told me during a late-night phone call. She's actively helping him create shell companies. I followed them to a meeting with someone from a small accounting firm, some shady guy named Victor. He's the one setting up the accounts. Jessica's name is on some of the paperwork. Hearing this, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. The woman I had shared my life with, the woman I thought I knew, was knee-deep in a scheme that could land her in prison. But why? Was she in love with Daniel? Was she desperate for money? Or had he manipulated her into this mess? The pieces started coming together when I reviewed footage from the bedroom camera one morning. Jessica had come home late the previous night and gone straight to bed, but not before pulling out her hidden phone from the ventilation duct. I watched as she texted someone, Daniel, I assumed, with a frantic look on her face. The text thread, which synced to the cloned phone, sent shivers down my spine. Jessica, Victor says the numbers don't add up. He's asking questions. Daniel, don't panic. I'll handle it. Jessica, I told you this was a bad idea. If they trace it back to me, my career is over. Daniel, relax. We're too far in to back out now. Just stick to the plan. She'd added one more message after a pause. Jessica, do you ever think about what this is doing to my family? Daniel hadn't replied. That message hit me like a punch to the gut. Was Jessica having second thoughts? Was there still a part of her that cared about the life we'd built together? Or was it guilt? Simple, selfish guilt, gnawing at her conscience because she knew she'd crossed a line? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't let her continue down this path. The final push came when Travis uncovered a connection I hadn't expected. Daniel Whitaker had once been sued by a former business partner, a man who accused him of coercing his wife into signing fraudulent documents under duress. The case had been dismissed for lack of evidence, but the parallels to my situation were impossible to ignore. Was Daniel using Jessica as his scapegoat? Was he planning to throw her under the bus if things went south? That night, I confronted Jessica, not about the affair, but about her work. You've been acting strange lately, I said as we sat at the dinner table. Is everything okay at the office? She stiffened, her fork pausing mid-air. Why would you ask that? I don't know, I said, feigning nonchalance. You've just seemed stressed, like something's bothering you. She forced a laugh. It's just the usual. Deadlines, office politics. Nothing out of the ordinary. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted to the side, avoiding my gaze, as if she knew I could see right through her lie. After she went to bed, I called Travis. I think it's time we bring in someone else, I told him. A lawyer. Someone who can help us build a case. Are you sure? He asked. Once you go down that road, there's no turning back. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the darkened window of our bedroom where Jessica was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. I'm sure, I said finally. She's in too deep, and I'm not going to let her take me down with her. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm. The pieces were all falling into place. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out, and when it did, Jessica and Daniel would have nowhere to hide. I spent the next 2 days working through a haze of anger and determination. I wasn't just a man wronged anymore. I was a strategist, quietly assembling the pieces of a plan that would bring Jessica and Daniel's house of lies crashing down. They had played me for a fool, but they underestimated me. They would soon learn that I wasn't the passive, oblivious husband they thought I was. The idea of revenge wasn't just about justice. It was about closure. I couldn't simply walk away, letting them continue to exploit and betray without consequences. No, this would be calculated, precise, and it would leave them with nothing. I met with a lawyer the next afternoon, a sharp woman named Amanda Tran, who specialized in corporate fraud cases. She didn't mince words. Based on what you've told me, your wife is deeply implicated. But if we're going to pursue this legally, we'll need hard evidence, documents, recorded conversations, anything that ties her and Daniel to these fraudulent activities. I've already got some of that, I said, sliding my phone across the table to show her the texts and emails I'd collected. And I have a PI gathering more. Amanda nodded, impressed. This is a strong start. But I'll be honest with you, going public with this could get messy. There's a risk of backlash, especially if she claims she was coerced or manipulated. That's why I'm not stopping here, I said. I want to take this beyond just exposing them. I want to make sure they feel the fallout in every part of their lives. Amanda raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. What exactly do you have in mind? I began planting seeds of doubt within Jessica's carefully curated world. The contracts I'd photographed from her laptop bag weren't just evidence. They were tools. I anonymously sent copies of them to her company's compliance department, framing them as a whistleblower report. A week later, Jessica came home looking frazzled. "Work's been insane lately," she said as she dropped her bag on the kitchen counter. "There's some kind of internal audit happening. They're asking everyone for financial documentation." I feigned concern. "That sounds stressful. Do you need help with anything?" She shook her head, too distracted to notice the edge in my voice. "No, it's fine. I'll handle it." She had no idea that I was the one who had triggered the audit. Travis, my private investigator, uncovered a critical weakness in Daniel's armor. His so-called luxury real estate firm was a front for laundering money, not just through Jessica's company, but through several shell businesses that were poorly concealed. "He's gotten sloppy," Travis told me during one of our late-night calls. "If we tip the right people off, it'll all come crashing down." But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger on Daniel just yet. Instead, I decided to make him paranoid. Using a burner phone, I sent him an anonymous message. "Unknown number. You're being watched. Clean your books before it's too late." Travis followed him the next day and reported that Daniel spent hours at his office, shredding documents and frantically making calls. The thought of him sweating over his misdeeds brought me a rare moment of satisfaction. Jessica's phone cloning tool delivered its most damning evidence yet. A video sent from Daniel to Jessica. In it, he was lounging on a yacht, toasting to their future, and promising that, once this all blows over, we'll be untouchable. The arrogance in his voice made my blood boil, but it also gave me an idea. I edited the video, splicing it with clips of Jessica's texts and emails to him. Then I created a new email account and sent the video to a carefully curated list: her closest friends, her boss, and her parents. That night, Jessica's phone didn't stop buzzing. She retreated to the bedroom, frantically calling people to explain, or rather, lie her way out of, what they'd seen. I stayed in the living room, pretending not to notice, while a storm of her own making swirled around her. The day everything came to a head was a Friday. Jessica left the house in the morning, claiming she had an important meeting at work. But the GPS tracker on her car told a different story. She wasn't headed to her office. She was going to meet Daniel at a private club downtown. I followed her, careful to stay out of sight, and called Travis to meet me there. By the time I arrived, he was already stationed outside the club, camera in hand. "They're upstairs," he said. "Room 302. I've already got footage of them entering." I nodded, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. Together, Travis and I walked into the club, pretending to be potential members interested in touring the facilities. With the manager distracted, we made our way upstairs. The door to room 302 was slightly ajar, and I could hear their voices, Jessica's low and frantic, Daniel's calm and commanding. I pushed the door open just enough to catch sight of them without being seen. Jessica was pacing, clutching a folder of documents, while Daniel sat at a table, his laptop open. "This is falling apart, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "The audit at work, the anonymous tips, someone's onto us." Daniel didn't look up from his screen. "Relax. I've handled worse. Just stick to the plan, and we'll come out ahead." I pulled back, my heart racing. I had everything I needed. That evening, I set the final stage of my plan into motion. I emailed all the evidence, videos, documents, recorded conversations, to Jessica's company, Daniel's competitors, and local law enforcement. Then I packed a bag and left the house without a word. By the next morning, everything had unraveled. Daniel's office was raided by federal agents, his name plastered across every news outlet as the leader of a massive fraud operation. Jessica's company suspended her pending an investigation, and her face was a mask of shock and despair when she called me, begging for answers. I didn't answer. She didn't deserve my pity or my forgiveness. As I sat in a quiet hotel room, watching the fallout unfold on the evening news, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. I had lost the woman I thought I loved, but I had also reclaimed my life. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe again. But as I reached for the remote to turn off the TV, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown number, nicely done. But this isn't over. I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. Was it Daniel? One of his associates? Or someone else entirely? The game, it seemed, wasn't finished just yet. The days following the fallout were both satisfying and unnerving. Jessica's world crumbled at an astonishing speed. The company she worked for issued a public statement distancing itself from her, suspending her indefinitely while cooperating with authorities. Daniel's arrest was all over the news, his smug face caught in a grainy mugshot that seemed to strip him of his power. I should have felt triumphant. This was the moment I had worked so hard to engineer. But that text, nicely done. But this isn't over, lingered in my mind like a dark cloud. I didn't know who had sent it, but one thing was clear. Someone wanted me to know they were watching. 3 days later, Jessica showed up at the house. I hadn't spoken to her since I left, but I wasn't surprised to find her standing on the porch, her hair disheveled and her eyes red from crying. I opened the door just enough to let her know she wasn't welcome inside. "Matthew," she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know where else to go. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," I replied coldly. "Shouldn't you be talking to your lawyer?" Her lip quivered. I didn't know it would get this bad. Daniel said it was just a temporary thing. He said no one would get hurt. I laughed bitterly. No one would get hurt? Do you even hear yourself? You didn't just cheat on me, Jessica. You helped him steal millions. You put our entire life at risk, and for what? A man who's probably already sold you out to save himself? Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered the emails, the texts, the lies she had spun so effortlessly. "I didn't know he'd throw me under the bus," she whispered, as if that somehow made it better. "Please, Matthew, if you ever loved me, help me fix this." I stepped closer, my voice like ice. "I did love you, and that's exactly why I won't help you. You made your bed, Jessica. Now lie in it." That night, as I sat in my empty house, the unease crept back in. The text, the idea that someone was still watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel, even behind bars, wasn't finished with me yet. I called Travis, who confirmed my suspicions. Daniel's got connections. The kind that don't just go away because he's in a cell. I wouldn't be surprised if he's pulling strings to figure out who brought him down. "Do you think he knows it was me?" I asked, my voice low. Travis paused. "He's smart, Matthew. He might not have proof, but he's probably got a pretty good idea." I couldn't wait for Daniel to make the first move. If he wanted to play games, I would make sure he regretted it. Through Travis, I learned that Daniel's arrest hadn't eliminated all his resources. He still had associates, people who owed him favors, people who were loyal for reasons I couldn't fathom. But loyalty could be bought. Using some of the savings I'd stashed away, I hired Travis to dig deeper into Daniel's network. What he found was a web of financial and personal connections that stretched far beyond the real estate scams. Offshore accounts, dummy corporations, even ties to a local politician who had quietly smoothed over his legal troubles in the past. With this information, I crafted a new plan. Not just to protect myself, but to dismantle what little power Daniel had left. The key was Daniel's most trusted associate, a man named Victor, the same accountant who had helped set up the shell companies. Travis discovered that Victor had a weakness: gambling. He owed tens of thousands of dollars to a local bookie and was desperate to find a way out. I reached out to Victor anonymously, pretending to be an interested party who could help him with his debts. At first, he was hesitant, but when I dangled the promise of cash, and the threat of exposing his gambling problem to his family. He cracked. In exchange for wiping out his debts, Victor agreed to provide me with a treasure trove of documents linking Daniel to a slew of illegal activities that hadn't yet come to light. Drug trafficking, money laundering, even connections to violent criminal organizations. The evidence was damning enough to ensure that Daniel would never see the outside of a prison cell again. Once I had what I needed, I sent the documents to the FBI, the IRS, and every major news outlet I could think of. I made sure Daniel's name would become synonymous with corruption and betrayal. But I didn't stop there. I leaked the information to his remaining associates, ensuring they knew just how exposed they were. The fallout was swift and brutal. Daniel's allies abandoned him, scrambling to save their own skins. His lawyer quit, citing irreconcilable differences. And within weeks, Daniel was moved to solitary confinement for his own safety after multiple threats from his former associates. Jessica wasn't spared, either. The audit at her company revealed her role in the fraud, and while her involvement was less extensive than Daniel's, it was enough to cost her everything. She lost her job, her professional reputation, and the support of her friends and family. The last time I saw her, she was sitting on a park bench outside the courthouse, her face hollow and pale. She looked up at me as I passed, but I didn't stop. She had become a stranger to me, a reminder of a life I was finally ready to leave behind. It took months for the dust to settle. I sold the house, cutting ties with the place that had become a monument to betrayal. I moved to a smaller town, taking a job with a startup where no one knew my past. One night, as I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. You played a good game. Let's see how you handle the next one. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was it Daniel? Jessica? Someone else entirely? I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Let them come. I had faced betrayal, lies, and danger, and I had come out stronger. Whatever game they wanted to play next, I was ready. And that's how it ended. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below. Tell us, what would you have done in their shoes?